Welcome to Melt University. This series will help you build your brand, inform you on a variety of career paths, and introduce you to top executives in sports and marketing. Now, here's your host, the president and CEO of Melt, one of the largest independent sports and event marketing agencies in the country, Vince Thompson.
Welcome back, students. Virtual Melt University. We are barreling into the fall with lots of questions surrounding you being back on campus, live classroom, wearing masks to class, virtual class. Are you going to be able to go to a football game, college football game this fall? SEC, ACC, Big 12, Big 10, Pac 12, all the other ones. And there is nobody further ahead of this curve than my dear friend Tony Barnhart. He also is just an amazing person and also lives by his values. He is a servant leader, and he will talk about his career path. He'll talk about his passions. He'll talk about what he sees as future opportunities because he is of new careers in college athletics and sports, and he's on the cusp of this. Uh, we call him Mr. College Football, and that's probably an understatement as a moniker. Was with the Atlanta Journal for many, many years, insider on CBS Sports, SEC Network, Paul Feinbaum, but started it all down with the University of Georgia. Go Dogs! And we'll talk about his passion and career path there. Subsequently moved to Greensboro and began his career. Came back to Atlanta in '84. I've been reading his columns for many years, and AJC, and then to CBS, into ESPN, College Game Day, like I said, Feinbaum Show, and now writing a lot of really fun gigs for SI.com, and has been awarded so many awards and tributes for not only his professional career, but just like I said, his personal value system, Sports Writer of the Year, NFF, College Hall of Fame, Football Writers Association, Basketball Writers Association, and I think we're going to get a treat today. So, Tony Barnhart, Mr. College Football, welcome to Virtual Melt University.
Well, thank you, Vince. I appreciate it. It's we are all uh, living in what my dear late friend Mike Slive would say. The philosopher once said, "May you live in interesting times." Well, we are living in interesting times, and sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's not so good, and sometimes it feels like Groundhog Day, and sometimes it's just. But it's we've always preached in talking to students and others that, hey, look ahead to the future, but make sure you take care of today. So we're all about taking care of today and then hopefully preparing for what's going to be a better future.
Well, we do know, like I said, if you and I were having this discussion in February, and we said, hey, we're going to take a Hollywood script to Hollywood, and we're going to say there's going to be a global pandemic. We're all going to be inside for 6 months. There's not going to be any college football. We probably would have gotten run out of Hollywood in that afternoon. And I tell our students ideas that I would bring to clients 6 months ago. They'd kick me out of the room, think I was crazy. They're now coming back going, hey, maybe that's not such a bad idea. So in the spirit of silver linings, a lot of people are being pushed out of their comfort zone, and no better time for our students to really begin thinking about their post college career. Because Tony, we know that people coming into the sports business and journalism business and sports marketing business, and you've seen all these things, but it's going to be very, very difficult on entry level job people because there's so many people unemployed, in our space that they'd be willing to take, a lesser job for lesser wages, which is
Sure.
the job market. So I want to pull it all the way back to one thing that we always love to lead off with our guest, and one thing that I'm always fascinated with these perfect stories, and one thing that we've hit on is that the passion of that which you pursue in a professional sense. So you get to Georgia, you have a degree in journalism. So at what point in your childhood or high school or at University of Georgia did this true passion really sort of kick in and drove you to pursue it in a professional manner?
Well, I was torn, particularly in high school. I had an English teacher who was very very supportive, and she said, if you really work at this, you could make a living writing. And of course, the operative word there was work. And so I that was part of me. The other part of me was I was a football player. I wasn't very good, but I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the game. I was fascinated by how coaches changed people's lives and how they changed my life. So there was also a part of me that wanted to teach and coach. And I think the deal breaker came when I started my undistinguished academic career at Georgia Southern with a bunch of my high school classmates. And while I was there, I had a chance to join the student newspaper because they were looking for somebody with the help in the sports department. I said, well, I know how to write and I know sports. Maybe I should give this a try. And they sent me to a basketball game. I wrote my first story, had my first byline, and I said, this is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
And there came a time that I decided being a sports writer was what I was going to do. And I transferred to journalism school at Georgia and graduated and got my first job. I went to work in my first job the day after graduation. I graduated from Georgia on June 10th. And then the June 11th, I got my first paying job as a newspaper person in Union, South Carolina, making $125 a week. And I was rich beyond my dream.
You were and you were also in Nirvana because you're like, I'm actually getting paid.
That's right.
Something I really love, and that's the thing that we talk about. We talk to our kids about, and we hear this a lot. Is that you know a student? I've got a son, it's a sophomore at Georgia, but a student will go to school and they think, well, I'm going to go be a doctor, lawyer, attorney, or whatever. I mean, accountant. Their parents may have said, "Hey, this is something you need to do," but we see a lot of the students wrestling with figuring out how to please those that they need to be pleasing versus pursuing their passion. And sometimes that outcome creates friction. But what we talk to our kids a lot is that pursue your passion with zeal. And if you do something that you love, you won't work a day in your life. And I would suppose along your illustrious career, you've probably never worked a day in your life just based on the
Yeah.
fact you were always able to practice your passion against that. So no matter what it is, talk about your philosophy on that pursuit of passion. And to your point, it's unheard of now that you step into a job the day after you graduate. You got to take a gap year. You need a downtime. Da, 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 da. But we just had to go to work.
No,
And,
no,
and
none of those options were available to us, Vince. We had to go to work. Going home was not an option. Not that my mother would not have welcomed me home, but in my mind, that was not an option.
right,
It was time to go to work and get the. Yeah, and I tell the students I talk to now says, look, the odds are very much against. I hope you get to your dream job as soon as you want to get it, but getting to your dream job is never a straight line. It never will be.
no,
And you've got to first you got to get a job. Okay, get a job and then get another job and then start the pursuit. But yeah, I had classmates of mine at Georgia in journalism school who were going to hold out, and if they couldn't go to work for the Atlanta Journal Constitution, they just weren't going to do it,
right.
and that didn't make any sense to me. To me, you got a job that they would pay you a living wage to be a sports writer, and then do a good job, and then figure out what the next job is.
Right. Well, I mean, because we're all old school, but I see it every day. Is that the students they want to hold out or they want to be the CEO right now, or they're like, well, I don't like this job, I'm going to change and go, something in 3 more months because there's so much more benchmarking. But I'm telling you, I think that we're trying to really talk straight and tough to them. It's going to be it's a whole different landscape out there right now.
Sure.
Like I said, I personally have furloughed 80% of my staff. Great people, but I mean the sports and the live event business, have obviously dried up right now to the main extent. And so I do think it's wise that you share that. So you start this climb. You stayed in Greensboro for how long?
Uh, we were in the little paper in South Carolina, Union, South Carolina. We were there for nine months,
9 months.
and then moved to Greensboro, North Carolina. Maria and I got married up there,
Mm-hmm.
and got married in the chapel at High Point College,
Oh, wow.
High Point University.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in Greensboro. We were in Greensboro for really 7.5 years. I mean, the goal was to work for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
So you had a target, you had a mission.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And Maria and I talked about it a lot. We first of all, we loved living in North Carolina. We got married there. Our daughter was born there. Uh, it was just a wonderful place to live, and we just sort of said, you know what, we're gonna stay here until the day, whenever that day comes,
Mm-hmm.
I get the opportunity to go to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Well, that came in August of 1984. So we moved to Atlanta, and basically, she Maria looked at me and says, "Well, big boy, whatever you're going to do in the business, you're going to have to do it right here, because if you cover college football, there is no better place to live and work than in Atlanta, Georgia." So we have been here ever since.
So you get the holy grail of jobs in the college football. I mean, I know Birmingham would have argued that at the time, with the college football capital of the world, and you're working, I'm assuming, for the legendary Furman Bisher, who,
Oh yeah,
between probably him and Larry Munson and a couple others, really paved the way for for all of us in this industry. So you get there, and you're, as Maria said, you're sort of like the Walinda boys. You're out there on that high wire, without a net. Tell us about, quote unquote, going to the big leagues. So to your point, I mean, the AJC. I was living in Birmingham at the time, but the AJC was the gold standard.
right. Well, think about this. My goal is to work for the AJC, and not only do I get the job working for the AJC, they call me up and ask me to come interview to be the beat writer for the University of Georgia, my
Wow.
alma mater.
Wow.
And so I got the job, and it was an incredible thing to be a part of, and I did it for a couple of years. But then, as always, something happened, and what happened is after I'd done the beat and for a couple of years, the sports editor of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, a guy by the name of Van McKenzie, one of the most brilliant people I've ever met, brought me into his office one day and said, and I'm 29 years old, something like that.
Right.
He looks at me and goes, "How would you like to be the assistant sports editor?"
Wow.
And I'm thinking, "Are you kidding me? To do all this and to be the assistant?" And I was going to be one of several now. I wasn't going to be the only one, but I was going to be an assistant sports editor of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And I'm thinking, as much as I'm enjoying what I'm doing and what a great job it is, you're talking about getting an opportunity
Right.
to be an assistant sports editor at a major metropolitan newspaper in one of the best sports sections
Mm-hmm.
in the world at the age of 29.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, I said, how can I pass that up? And so I walked away from writing to be the assistant sports editor for a couple of years and learned. I can't tell you how much I learned, and I'm so glad I did it. I was also, after about a year, I was completely miserable. Uh, it was a great job, and I learned a lot, but I was working late hours at night, putting out the newspaper.
Yeah.
And so, bottom line, I'm glad I did it for 2 years. I'm glad I did it. I learned a lot about the business. But then back in '87, I came back to writing again, and I became more of a writer that covered all the colleges, all the ACC and the SEC, and did some national stuff. So they expand when they brought me back to writing. They expanded my role, which is exactly what I hoped would happen. But
Well,
yeah,
you point out a couple of things, and one thing that we have heard from a lot of our guests, including SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey, is that never be afraid to push yourself out of your comfort zone, because
yep,
he graduated upstate New York. First job was in Podunk, Louisiana, and he said, I knew I needed to push myself out of the comfort zone. I was ready to do that. I took that risk and set him on his path. But if you think about unwittingly your path, you're in North Carolina. You make all these amazing connections with the ACC. Then your dream to go back to the AJC. You cover the one of the most vaunted teams in the SEC. Then you have an opportunity to really learn more of facets and the elements of the publishing business and the paper business and the print business, which you could argue that experience, even as hard as it was, is probably contributed to your career success today based on one of the axioms is life is not linear. So
Correct.
we all are living that now, and I think our students probably would have figured it out a hell of a lot longer than they're figuring it now, because none of us figured out we'd be here. But talk about that philosophy of pushing yourself out of the comfort zone, because you really don't have anything to lose, do you, Tony?
No, you really don't. You really don't. And what it is I spent 2 years. I spent 2 years in a job that taught me a lot. Now, did I enjoy every minute of it? No, because I didn't. I didn't like the late hours.
Right.
Because literally, I was a sports editor who was in at night putting out the newspaper. And our last deadline was like 1 a.m.
Yeah, and
And
people don't really
driving back home
understand.
after that was not a lot of fun. So
No, they don't understand that these kids now don't understand. But like, you had to shove that sucker out the door because it had to be on people's doorsteps at
oh,
5 or 6 the next morning every day.
right. Absolutely, and deadlines are a fact of life. And when you don't make deadlines, you got the people who run the printing presses who are behind. You got the people who drive the trucks behind. You got the people who deliver the newspapers on somebody's doorstep. They're behind. So it all comes back to you. And if you go through a stretch where you're blowing deadlines, now you can blow deadlines when there's breaking news or something big is happening.
Right.
They'll let you stretch it, but every day, day in and day out, no sir. You got to be on deadline. If you're not, you're going to hear about it.
Right. Yeah. And to your point, and that's a huge amount of responsibility. And so talk about, you had this great success at the AJC. How did you begin to evolve into your broadcast career? Because obviously, a lot of our students want to be in front of the camera. It's obviously glamorous to them, but it's not all it seems, and that it seems. But two things: talk about your evolution to broadcast, but also talk about it ain't as sexy as it appears to be.
Oh my goodness. Well, as things move along with the newspaper business, I just had people telling me and others, and my wife told me this, and my late father-in-law, her dad, told me that I had a face that maybe I should give TV a try. And I didn't know where to break in, but one thing I found about the cable TV companies back then had what they called a local access channel, where they could put
Right, right.
anything they could put anything they wanted. They could put the city council meetings and high school football and sports programming. So, but the DeKalb County was free as part of their cable package to put anything they want on that cable access channel.
Right.
Well, I come to find out that they're doing several things there at the cable access channel. They're showing some high school football games, and I just and they were also doing some sports programming. So I just called them up. I said, "Hey, I don't know that I'd ever be any good at this, but I'd really like to try. I'd like to try because I know sports. I've never done television, so they brought me in, and I did some high school football. I did a show called Sports Rap, Sports WRAP, Sports Rap. I was just absolutely dreadful at it. Just we we pulled out some of those old. First of all, I'm sure I still have a Southern accent, but I had a real Southern accent
So
back in
you
1980.
say your audition tapes might qualify as bloopers today? Is that what?
Oh my goodness! Oh my! But it was great. One of the things I tell young people, I said, you got to find some place where you can be bad, because you're not going to be good when you start. So
Right.
you got to learn some place. You got to find some place where you can be bad, then learn how to get good.
Yes.
And that was a tremendous help for me. I learned what not to do. I learned how to think in sound bites instead of rattling on for a minute and a half to 2 minutes, which is what you're not supposed to do. So I
Right.
learned some of the fundamentals, and then with that experience, had a little confidence to reach out to some friends at ESPN. I I don't know if you remember this. They used to have during the Thursday night games, they'd have a segment at halftime called the halftime blitz.
Mm-hmm.
And what they would do is they'd go from region to region, four different regions, east, south, Midwest, and west. And a reporter would stand up there and basically talk about the games. This was Thursday night. Talk about the games coming up for the weekend. And got some help from a friend of mine, Ivan Mazel, who was doing the
Oh
East
yeah.
for him.
Oh yeah.
And I reached out to Ivan and I told him, I said, I think I could do this. I think I could do the South. And I got the interview and eventually got the job. And that's where my relationship with ESPN started in 1994 during the halftime blitz once a week on the Thursday night games.
The good old days of ESPN. When and they would float around. I miss that. But we come back to this is that you took that shot with with a local. I never, by the way, I never knew the story how your broadcast career started, but with a local free channel covering high school. You took that shot. You had no experience in front of the camera. You were willing to be bad at something, and that is such. They see you now on ESPN or SEC or Time or something, and they just assume that you sort of our students just assume you sort of just lit there or landed there. They don't realize, that we all started by taking that shot, and then obviously that has led to a more than 20-year career, 25-year career, both in front of the camera and you've also been a very prolific author. I think you've published 7 or 8 books, I think, by my count. Larry Munson book and Dooley book and Southern Traditions book, and so talk about a couple things. Talk about because kids now possess all these tools to really basically be self-published now or be their self-talk show host now, and not like the old days. But talk about some of your publishing career, and if students have ideas for those things, because you never know who's going to read it. It's going to get picked up for a movie or content or Netflix. But talk about your publishing career a little bit, because I just love your reading and I love the way you write.
Well, thanks. The book that I absolutely knew that I wanted to get done early in my career was Southern Fried Football, which would be an overview of why we in the South are so gaga about college football. All the history and traditions and coaches and players, and I wanted to just do one big, not a dry history book, but basically an overview of what how it's unique to our culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I got that book done in 1999, and then redid it, rewrote it again in 2007 after that crazy season where Appalachian State beat Michigan at Michigan and all that. So that was one that I felt very good about, and I think that it has sort of stood the test of time.
Right.
The Larry Munson book came about because Larry had sworn, and he told me this, that he would never do a biography about him. He would never do it. He just didn't think it was a good idea.
Old
He had
school guys
read an article.
didn't think anybody cared about what they had to say.
Yeah, but growing up in the South, we all know different. We know what the great voices, the Larry Munson, the Jim Fifes, all those people meant to the people who followed these teams. That's their guy. That's who they listened to. And so his son, Larry's son, Michael, came to me and said, "We've talked Dad into doing the book," and he said he would do it if you would do it. And I'm going like, "Are you kidding me?" Yeah, absolutely. I remember I was driving somewhere when he called and said, Dad said he'll do it if you'll do it." And I said, "Absolutely." And putting that book together was as wonderful an experience as I've ever had in the business, because for about 8 to 9 months, 3 days a week, 2 or 3 days a week, I would go sit down with Larry and we talked for an hour and a half or
Ah,
so. And it was just absolutely an incredible experience. And we had a blast. Did several book signings with him, which was just out of this world,
mm,
out of this world. And so yeah, I have a lot of pride in that book. And obviously, Coach Dooley, Vince Dooley, he was approached to do it, and again, he he asked what my interest would be, and obviously I'm to do Vince Dooley's autobiography. Yeah, I think I'd like to do that, and that was an incredible experience. So the books are sort of a different. Vince, I tell the young people I speak with everything. You got a lot of different tools in your toolbox. You got a lot of different muscles, creative muscles to flex. Learn to use them all.
Right.
Learn to have a lot of different tools in the toolbox because sooner or later things are going to change, and you won't be able to use this tool, but you can use that tool.
Right.
And so do as many different kinds of things you can. And books was just one of those creative muscles that you like to stretch.
Well, you hit on a lot of things, and obviously, some of our listeners may not know that Larry Munson, the famous voice of Georgia Bulldogs for many years, Jim Fife, one of my when I was working for my first job, my summer internships, Bobby Lauer in Montgomery, Alabama. I used to go sit in the WLWI booth at 5 o'clock with Jim Fife when I got off doing my intern program at the bank, and just listen to the masters. But you hit on something I want to unpack here for a minute. We're talking about Southern Pride football, and in context of what we see going on today in the COVID environment, and how the SEC is still trying to lead the way and hold on and hold out to get some college football played. But so to your point, there's just such a deeper cultural significance to college football played in the South. It transcends damn near most anything, and it goes multi generations. I mean, and I think that our students, particularly on these college campuses, they feel that same emotion. They feel that same passion. They feel that same kindred spirit. You see the sophistication of Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, saying, "Hey, we want to play." But where do you? A couple things. Talk about because obviously the controversy with the Big 12, Big 10, and the Pac-12. But talk about the multi-generational ingrained passion of how much deeper this is driving this debate today, and where do you see this going?
Well, one of the things that one of the themes we dealt with in Southern Fried Football is that it was Bill Curry said this. He said college football is not a game; it's who we are. It's a part of it's deep into our DNA. And because these Saturdays, 6 or 7 Saturdays in the fall, are cultural experiences where we share, multi generational tailgates, an opportunity to see friends. Like Vince and I, you and I've talked about this. I've got three of my fraternity brothers who we get. One lives in Colorado Springs, one lives in Albany, Georgia, one lives up in Ringgold, Georgia, near the Tennessee line, and the four of us see each other one time a year.
Right.
One time a year, and that's the Georgia Florida game in Jacksonville. And
Wow.
our year is built around. Obviously, I've got to be there to work, but they're there to for the experience. And the idea right now, I'm going to have a Zoom call with them soon. And the idea of them right now, the idea that Jacksonville might not be played. I mean, they're still hoping that it is, but the idea that the game in Jacksonville might not be played is just absolutely gut wrenching for them
Mhm.
because they build their year around this trip.
Yeah.
My buddy in Colorado Springs, fraternity brother, who's best man in my wedding. I mean, he's got to go to some effort to get here, and he's already changed his plane ticket one time. And so my point is, it's so deeply ingrained in our culture. It's just not just a game. It's a big chunk of who we are as people.
Well, the great saying is you better not plan a wedding on a Saturday in the fall in the SEC country because odds are you probably won't have many people attending. I've always said that we should take the unemployed wedding planners in the fall and make them tailgate planners, and they would probably make or combine the two would make a hell of a lot more money. But with that said, and where we see this going, and you are around a lot of campuses, you're around a lot of colleges, you're around a lot of athletic departments. Your personal experience, my personal experience, included at Auburn University. But interviewing some of these great ads, Greg McGarity at Georgia, Ross Bjork at Texas A&M, Alan Green at Auburn. We've really been enlightened about a lot of new career opportunities that even I were, either loosely aware of or not aware of. Areas of mental health, areas
Mhm.
of student athletes beginning to, capitalize on the name, image, and likeness, the compliance of that process, the safety of fans attending again, but from the perch of where you sit. And by the way, you don't necessarily have to be a journalism major or a comms major or a PR major to get that job in the sports information, but the perch of which you sit and the types of people that you talk to, both in the athletic department and in the media world and the new media world. Where do you see these new opportunities, and what do you suggest to our students that they try to pursue this? Because my big mantra is the campus is the ultimate professional lab, and you're never going to be in an environment greater than to hone your skills and build these amazing relationships. And a lot of times, students don't recognize it. So, where do you see these ops?
Well, these I think one of the things is you mentioned the name, image, and likeness thing, and that is something that we all going to have to recognize. It's going to have a tremendous impact on the athletes, obviously, but on the campus as well.
Mm-hmm.
I just think there are going to be numerous opportunities as the structure changes, and it's going to be something. But yeah, I would look as the athletes become compensated. There are going to be certain things, areas where they need help. Well, for example, when we bring up name, image, and likeness, I think there's going to be a whole department of the athletic association. That's going to be what they do, is monitoring these deals, various endorsement deals and other deals for compliance. I think schools will definitely take on people like that who know about marketing and perhaps even to help
Right.
uh, the student athletes do that. So I just think that you just got to look. The needs change as the culture change, as the games change. The needs change. Figure out what the need is and figure out a way that you can fill it.
Well, you hit on something, Tony, and it's fascinating because I never thought I would be having conversations with head football coaches, old football coaches, college coaches, recruiters, and current and future student athletes by saying, you know what, I don't. What is this school going to do for my brand? Not what can my brand do for this school.
Sure.
So I literally met with a high school senior, successful athlete, and they want to start a fashion line at 17. And I'm like, oh my God, the sophistication. And then you juxtapose that, with the old ball coaches and Spurrier and Saban and Gus and all these guys who've just been football coaches. And I don't think there's a better time and opportunity, particularly, and this is what a lot of our students don't miss it, but a lot of folks, our peers miss it, is that the sophistication of these students, these student athletes, is the most sophisticated that you and I will have ever seen in our lifetime. And maybe they've seen because of the wireless and the technology and the social and the media and the followers and the platform. Um, there are going to be new great career opportunities for students in creating non-traditional content on campuses on behalf of these student athletes. And I know it's complicated and devil's in the details, but we always focus on Tua and Trevor and Jake Fromm, but there's a lot of amazing student athletes that don't necessarily suit up for a football game on Saturday. So you see the opportunities out there, right?
Right. Well, yeah. Think about this. I've told people about this. It says, you know, yeah, it's easy. Looking at Trevor Lawrence, looking at Justin Fields, that's easy. Okay, that's just low hanging fruit. But what about the guy who is a good player, not a great player, but is the biggest deal to ever come out of his hometown
Mm-hmm.
in the state of Georgia, state of Alabama? And everybody there knows him. There's going to be opportunities for him to go back home while he's still a student and take advantage of that 3 or 4 year window while he's in college, where what people forget is that they focus on the big guys, on the Trevor Lawrences, and how much money they're going to make in the NFL and how much they're going to make in endorsements. Their biggest earning days are ahead of them. Well, for this group I'm talking about, good players but not great players who may or may not catch on with an NFL roster, their prime earning time is really going to be the 3 to 4 years, at least from a marketing and endorsement standpoint. Their prime earning time is going to be the 4 years that they're in college. That's when they're going to get their maximum amount. And so if you're looking at the market, looking ahead, that's something you need to keep in mind. It's not just the stars. It's the pretty good guys who are a big deal back in their hometown.
Right. Well, and the funny thing, Tony, and I've been around student athletes since 1980, and I'm a huge advocate for them because I think I have somewhat understanding of them. But the other thing that we want to educate our students on, and a lot of people are missing, is that what we call the non-revenue sports. Those athletes. I use the Auburn women's equestrian team as my talking point, but they work as hard. They probably aren't on a scholarship. They're paying their way. They're studying their way. They're practicing. They're winning. But whether it be female products or endemic feed and seed boots, hometown feed and seed store, Ace Hardware, and I also say hiring student athletes is amazing too because they're trained in discipline and initiative and leadership. But people fail to miss $500 or $1,000 to a student or student athlete is a lot of money. And I think you just hit on something giant. Peak earning period, or PEP, is for some of these kids could be while they're riding on the equestrian team or playing volleyball or playing softball. So I think you've hit on something good, and I know that a lot of our students are saying, hey, and by the way, they're around these kids every day. They have that trust, they have that relationship. They're in the classroom with them, and I think that's going to be a big space. But so a couple of things as we wrap up this fascinating conversation because we could just go on forever. But you know, outside of the traditional, we always love to ask our guests, like, what inspires and informs you from an information perspective every day, like podcasts or books or things that you're reading. I mean, we've heard some really fascinating recommendations, but we always like to enlighten our kids. I know you're big into history and understanding, those types of things. But share some of your recommendations that they should be reading and consuming or listening to, particularly now in this crazy environment in which we live.
Well, look at things outside of what your main interest is. Look at history. Look at politics. Look at all those things that'll stretch your imagination.
Hmm.
I think that's extremely important. Uh, you I mean, you get all of us, and I'm as guilty of this as anybody. We all get in our little rut and comfort zones, and
Right.
so by all means, look at. Don't say I don't like politics. Well, no, you don't. No, you may not like politics, but politics is going to have a profound impact on your life. And
Right.
once you graduate and have a mortgage and have children, you are going to understand that. So educate yourself on a lot of different things because you'll need them.
Well, and that's what we tell them is that um, outside, I mean, and by the way, there's so many great industry publications now that you write for, I write for, some we don't, we do, and all this type of stuff. And so there's really no reason that our students, and what we're trying to explain to them is that everything they're going to be doing in this very turbulent environment is couched as an audition now, whether they're, whether you were trying out for a team or a play or a TV or film or movie or a voice role. But so you're very well known, very visible, huge public persona, all over social media. And so if a student tracks you down and wants to hear from the wise sage, Tony Barnhart, what are the things that we always love to ask our guests, what gets Tony's attention if a student is reaching out? Because at that moment you can sell that effort and that drive and that attitude and that energy. But what gets your attention if somebody tries to DM you or something like that? What stands out?
Two things always. Understand that your life and your career path, you mentioned linear, your life and your career path is never going to be a straight line. There are going to be detours. You may detour into something that you don't want to do, but you feel like you have to do. Uh, and so understand, just because the next opportunity is not the opportunity you wanted, the one you planned for, the one you hoped for. The next opportunity, you may have to move laterally over here a few feet and then keep your forward march on. So always understand that it's not going to be your life and career won't be a straight line. Number two, no matter what happens, keep your heart and your mind open for whatever's next. Because something, don't close it off because something may happen. You said, well, maybe I need to look at that. Back in '08 when the economy tanked and they started doing buyouts at the AJC. I mean, I'm in a great position. I'm working for them. I'm working for CBS. I'm doing a lot of different things. But what was going to happen, I found, was as the AJC began to shrink their workforce, some of the jobs that existed before, you could still have a job, it just wouldn't be the job you had. And my job at the time, I was the ACC SEC National College Football Writer,
Wow.
and which allowed me to go places I wanted to go. And I was told that job may not be there. I may have to go back to being a beat guy again, which is where I started in 1984.
Right.
So I didn't necessarily want to do that, and so I had a big decision to make in '08. And the decision was stay at the AJC and maybe not do what I wanted to do, and which could have impacted a lot of different things. Even the television side could have been impacted
Right.
if I became a beat writer, or to take the buyout and find out if there were enough opportunity in television and radio to compensate for it. And I've got a good friend of mine who's my agent, Mark Carmody. And obviously, Mrs. College Football had a whole lot to say. She had a big part. She had a big part in that discussion, and ultimately, the decision was that enough people were going to say the people who we had to say no to in the past. A lot of those people were going to ask us again, and so we stepped out on the plank and decided to cut the umbilical cord to the AJC in '08, which was a scary thing to do, but we did.
That's diving off the deep end, my friend.
Well, and that's what we did. And what's interesting is not long after that decision was made, I get a call from a good friend of mine, Mike Oresco, who's now used to be one of the top dogs at CBS and is now the commissioner of the American Athletic Conference. He called and said, what would you think about doing your own show on the CBS Sports Network, the cable version of CBS Sports? And I said, yeah, I think I'd like to do that. And so my point is I had to take a chance, but an incredible door opened up not long after that. And I could not have taken advantage of that opportunity had I stayed at the AJC.
Right. So two or three headlines. You were willing to take that shot. You were willing to take that risk. You were willing to dive in that deep end. And as we wrap, because one thing we always really like to talk about is that the word relationship and the word reciprocal both start with the letters RE. And in this life, as fast as it's moving, talk about your philosophy on the value of building, nurturing, maintaining relationships. People ask me like how do you maintain a relationship with Coca-Cola for 20 years? And I simply tell them I never take the relationship for granted. And
Right.
in personal, romantic, professional, business partnerships, relationships, you can't take it for granted. You can't burn that bridge, because particularly in the industries that our students want to pursue and that you and I are in, you've got to continue to maintain those and nurture those relationships, right?
And I'll give you a perfect example. When I speak to journalism classes and other groups of students, they always ask me, so what do you do during the spring? Your football's over. What do you do? I said, in the spring, I said, I get in my car and I get on a plane and I try to visit as many SEC campuses as I can and talk to the head coach and talk to coordinators and players and stuff like that. They said, well, why do you do that? I said, it's about building relationships. And the students will sit there and look at me like, what are you talking about? And I said, no, I said, look, I don't care. And I can't remember who told me this, but I've stole it and I've used it. So I don't care if you're in the TV business, the newspaper business, or the aluminum siding business. Okay. You're in the relationship business. It's about building relationships and building trust so that when the time comes, you have something to base something on. So it's like people say, why do you go see these coaches? I said, because someday I'm going to need to get that coach on the phone and he's going to call me back. Why? Because I invested in the relationship bank up front. And that's what relationships are all about. They pay off if you invest in them, and as you said, don't take them for granted.
Well, and to your point, I mean, because you make it look easy, but nobody really realizes the many thousands of hours you put into building that relationship with a Kirby Smart or a Nick Saban, and for that crucial time that you need to be able to get them on the phone and get that information and get that scoop. And as fast as all that's moving now, that's certainly a hell of a lot comes into good advantage. But Tony, this has been it's just been so amazing. I've always wanted to sort of turn the microphone around on you, and you certainly didn't. You certainly didn't let me or our students down today. And we're living in fascinating times with Tony Barnhart, Mr. College Football. Follow him at Mr. CFB. If you really want to know the latest and greatest breaking news of our industry opportunities, one of the most kind, generous man in our profession. I think just an amazing, fascinating Hall of Fame career. But we both have a lot more tread in our tires and trying to stay on the treadmill as fast as we can. But Tony, Mr. College Football, we thank you so much for sharing your words and wisdom and advice and inspiration with the students of Virtual Melt University today.
All right. Well, always good to be with you, Vince, and you stay safe out there.
All right. Thank you so much, sir.
You bet.
Thanks, Vince. Hope you enjoyed today's virtual class. We'll be back soon with another edition of Melt University 2020.